You are standing in a narrow entryway in Osaka, and an old man hands you a small blue and yellow can, and he points at the sliding door that has screeched every morning for 40 years. You spray it once, the screech is gone, and he smiles like he has just shown you a secret. That was the morning everything I believed about that little can turned upside down. Here is what I learned in that country, and it is the thing dealers and repair shops never once said out loud. That ordinary can of multi-purpose spray, the one already sitting in your garage right now, can replace dozens of expensive products, stop the small breakdowns that drain your money, and make the things you own last years longer. Not because of marketing. Because ordinary Japanese households, living in one of the most humid, rust-hungry climates on Earth, quietly turned it into a tool of preservation. And before this video is over, I am going to tell you about a specific habit I watched in a workshop in Niigata in the winter of 2019, a method for protecting metal that a retired toolmaker showed me by candlelight that I have never once seen printed in any manual sold in the West. It costs nothing extra. It works in the home you already live in. Stay with me, because that one is the reason I finally understood why their tools outlast ours by decades. I want to be honest with you about who I was before all this. I was the man with a drawer full of specialized products, a can for squeaks, a separate spray for rust, a different bottle for locks, a tube for hinges. I spent money the way most of us do, believing that every small problem in the house needed its own expensive solution with its own clever label. I threw things away when they stuck, when they rusted, when they groaned. I bought new because fixing felt harder than replacing. That was me. Cluttered, wasteful, and quietly certain that this was just how life worked. Then I went to live among ordinary people in Japan, not the tourist Japan, but the back streets and the small houses and the workshops that smell of tatami and machine oil. And I started noticing something that made no sense to my Western eyes. These households, many of them careful with every single yen, kept almost nothing under the sink. Where I had 20 products, they had 2 or 3. And one of them, again and again, was that same blue and yellow can I had underestimated my entire life. So let me take you through what they actually do with it, because each thing I am about to show you saved me real money, and each one made me a little angrier that nobody had told me sooner. Let me start with the sliding doors, because that was the first miracle I witnessed. In older Japanese homes, the doors do not swing on hinges. They slide along wooden or metal tracks, and after years of use, those tracks collect grit and dry out and start to fight you. In the West, we would call a handyman, or we would live with the noise, or worse, we would rip the whole thing out and replace it. But the old man in Osaka taught me that you spray a light mist along the track, then you slide the door back and forth a few times to work it in, and you wipe away what beads up on the surface. The door that had screamed for 40 years went silent and smooth in under a minute. He told me his father had done the same thing, and his father before that, once these sprays reached ordinary homes after the war. Now here is the part that matters for your wallet. That same principle works on every sticking window, every stubborn drawer, every closet door in your house right now. The reason your windows fight you in summer is almost never that they are broken. It is friction. It is dried out tracks and swollen grime, and a repairman will happily charge you $80, $90, $100 to tell you that and fix it in 90 seconds. But you can do it yourself this afternoon. But a squeaking door is the small stuff. What truly changed the way I see that little can was watching how they fight rust. Because you have to understand something about Japan that we rarely think about here. The summers there are brutally humid. In many regions, the moisture in the air sits at 70, 80% for weeks on end. Metal does not stand a chance. Tools rust, locks seize, bicycles corrode, garden shears turn orange in a single wet season. In a climate like that, a household either learns to protect metal or it spends a fortune constantly replacing it. And that pressure, that constant war against moisture, is exactly why these households became so quietly brilliant at preservation. Necessity taught them what abundance let us forget. I watched a woman in her 70s in a small house outside Kyoto take a soft cloth and put just a little of the spray onto the cloth, not onto the object, and wiped down her good kitchen scissors, her pruning shears, and the metal fittings on her garden gate. Once a season. That was it. She told me those shears had belonged to her mother. They were older than I was, and they looked brand new. Meanwhile, I thought about the garden tools I had thrown in the bin back home because they had gone spotty with rust after 2 winters. I felt something close to shame. Here is the science underneath it, because I do not want you to just take an old memory on faith. That spray is not really a lubricant in the way we imagine oil. It began its life as a rust preventative. The name itself comes from a laboratory. It was formulated in San Diego, California in 1953, and the story goes that it took the chemist 40 attempts to get the formula right, which is where the number in the name comes from. Its original job, its very first purpose, was to keep the metal skins of aircraft and missiles from corroding. Protecting metal from moisture was not a side use. It was the whole reason it was invented. Somewhere along the way, we in the West forgot that and started thinking of it only as the thing you grab when a hinge squeaks. The Japanese households I lived near never forgot it. They used it the way it was designed to be used. A thin protective film that pushes water off metal and keeps the air from doing its slow damage. And when you understand that, you suddenly see 100 uses you were blind to before. Take a moment and think about how much money moves through your hands because metal things fail. The garden tools, the scissors, the locks, the hinges, the bicycle chain, the tools in the garage. Every one of those is a small repeated expense, and almost all of it comes down to corrosion and friction, the 2 exact problems that little can was born to solve. I added it up once for my own household over about 10 years, and it was well over $1,000 in things I had replaced that I could have simply protected. That number is what turned my curiosity into something like obsession. Now, therefore, you have to ask the obvious question. If this one cheap product does so much, why did so many of us grow up with a drawer full of expensive single-purpose sprays instead? And this is where the story stops being charming and starts being a little infuriating. Think about it from the other side of the counter. There is very little money in selling you one modest can that lasts 2 years and fixes 40 different problems. There is enormous money in convincing you that the squeak needs one product, the rust needs another, the lock needs a special graphite formula, the hinge needs its own branded oil, and the stuck bolt needs a premium penetrating spray at 3 times the price. The fractured shelf, the wall of specialized bottles, each with its own confident label, that is not there because you need it. It is there because a full shelf sells more than an empty one. And the repair trade has even less reason to tell you. Why would a shop teach you that the drawer you were about to pay them to fix, or the tool you were about to replace, could be saved in 30 seconds with something you already own? The knowledge that keeps you independent is exactly the knowledge that costs them a customer. This is not some grand dark conspiracy with men in a back room. It is simpler and quieter than that. It is just that nobody in the chain of selling has any reason to teach you how little you actually need. So the knowledge fades, not banned, just allowed to be forgotten. But the households in Japan never got the message that they were supposed to forget, and that is the whole gift of living among them. They kept treating that can as the everyday preservation tool it always was, and I want to keep handing you what they handed me. Let me tell you about locks, because this one saved me on the worst possible day. There was a winter morning in the north where the key to a garden storehouse simply would not turn. Frozen, stiff, years of grime packed into the mechanism. Back home, I would have assumed the lock was dying and started pricing a locksmith, and a locksmith call where I live starts at well over $100 just for the visit. The neighbor, an old farmer, did not even pause. A short spray into the keyhole, worked the key gently in and out a few times, and the lock turned like it was new. He looked at me like I had asked why the sun comes up. To him, this was not a trick. It was just Tuesday. That is a use I want you to hold on to, because a sticky lock or a stiff key is one of those problems that feels like a big, expensive failure and is almost always a tiny, cheap fix. A quick spray into the mechanism, work the key, and you have very likely bought yourself years more life from that lock. Just remember to be gentle and wipe away the excess, because you do not want dust sticking to what pools on the outside. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, and I want to stop and talk to you directly, because this next part is for you especially. You are thinking, this is fine for a man who went and lived in Japan, or for someone younger with a big garage full of projects, or for somebody handier than me. You are thinking maybe your hands are not as steady as they used to be, or your house is small, or you do not have tools or a workbench. I want to tell you honestly, none of that matters here. This is the part of what I learned that fits into the exact life you are living today, in the exact home you are sitting in, with nothing but that one can and a soft rag. That shift from reacting to preventing is worth more than any single trick I could give you. If you want to go deeper into everything I have gathered from those years, I put the most complete version of it into a book called Japanese Fix, which along with Deep Japanese and the full system covers not just the spray but the entire quiet system these households use to make things last. Everything I could not fit into a single video, the seasonal routines, the specific methods by room, the philosophy behind the habit, it is all in there, and you can find the details in the description below. It is the written version of everything this channel is about, and if these ideas are landing for you, I think you will find it worth your time. But therefore it raises the question that kept me up at night in that little rented room, the question that finally led me to the workshop in Niigata that I promised you at the very beginning. Because the most powerful things I learned were not big repair projects. They were tiny, gentle habits that anyone can do sitting at a kitchen table. Let me give them to you plainly. Your scissors. The ones in the kitchen drawer that have gotten stiff and leave your hand aching when you cut, open them all the way, put a small drop of the spray on a rag, and wipe the pivot point where the two blades cross. Open and close them a few times. That stiffness that you thought meant they were worn out and gone. Those scissors can cut cleanly for another 20 years. Your zippers. This one I learned from a woman who mended clothes, and it stunned me. A stubborn zipper on a coat or a bag, the kind that snags and makes you feel that everything is falling apart, will glide again with the tiniest touch of the spray on a cotton swab rubbed along the teeth. Not soaked, just a whisper of it. Then work the zipper up and down. It is the difference between throwing out a good coat and wearing it another 10 winters. Your garden shears and your houseplant scissors. Even if all you have is a balcony or a few pots on a windowsill, wiping the blades keeps them sharp feeling and rust free, and clean blades actually cut plants better, which keeps your plants healthier. That old woman near Kyoto taught me that a rusty blade crushes a stem while a clean one slices it, and the plant heals faster from a clean cut. The rubber seals on your refrigerator and your car doors. Now this surprised me more than almost anything, and I need to be careful how I say it because you must use only a very light touch and wipe away the excess. A thin wipe along a rubber door seal that has gone stiff and dry can keep it supple so it stops cracking, and a cracked seal on a fridge is what makes the motor run constantly and drives your electricity bill up without you ever knowing why. I watched a family do this to the seals on an old refrigerator that was still running perfectly after more than 20 years. None of that requires strength. None of it requires a workshop. None of it requires you to be young or handy or anything other than willing to spend 30 seconds and a few cents where you used to spend $50 and a trip to the store. This is the whole philosophy I carried home. Small, gentle, repeated care instead of expensive, sudden replacement. And once you start living that way, you begin to notice the deeper thing underneath it, the thing that took me the longest to understand and that I think is the real treasure hiding in that little can. Because here is what I finally grasped after enough seasons over there. In the West, we treat maintenance as something you do after a thing breaks. In those households, maintenance was something you did so that things never broke in the first place. It is a completely different relationship with the objects in your life. We wait for the squeak, the rust, the failure, the emergency, and then we react, usually by paying someone or buying new. They move through their homes quietly, preventing all of that before it ever started. A wipe here, a light mist there, twice a year. And their things simply did not fail the way ours do. Because I kept wondering, If a light film of oil protects metal for a season, what did people do before these sprays even existed? How did craftsmen in old Japan, the swordsmiths and the carpenters and the toolmakers, keep their precious steel from rusting in that murderous humidity for centuries before any laboratory in California ever mixed a formula? And the answer to that is the thing I most want to leave you with, because it is older, stranger, and in its own way more brilliant than anything on any store shelf. In the winter of 2019, I was introduced to a retired toolmaker in Niigata, a region on the snow-heavy western coast, a place that has made fine metal tools for a very, very long time. He was in his 80s, his workshop was cold and lit low, and he had agreed, reluctantly, to show a curious foreigner how the old hands protected their steel. And what he showed me connected the modern can directly back to a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. He explained that long before spray cans, the craftsmen of Japan protected their finest blades and tools with a thin coat of oil, wiped on and wiped almost entirely off, leaving only the faintest invisible film. The technique of preserving steel this way was already well established by the Edo period, the long era of peace that ran from the early 1600s to the 1860s, when the country's metalworking traditions reached extraordinary heights. The principle they understood centuries before modern chemistry could explain it was exactly the principle that blue and yellow can runs on. Water is the enemy of steel. Put the thinnest possible barrier between the metal and the moist air, and the metal survives generations. But here is the specific thing he showed me, the method I have never seen printed in any Western manual, the finale I promised you. It was not about the oil alone. It was about the cloth and the way you finish. He took a soft, clean cotton cloth and put the smallest amount of oil onto it. Then he folded it and worked the oil through the cloth until the cloth itself was barely damp, almost dry to the touch. He called this preparing the cloth. Then, and this is the part that changed everything for me, he did not wipe the tool to make it wet. He wiped the tool to make it dry. He passed that barely oiled cloth over the steel again and again, buffing it, until the surface looked and felt completely clean, as if there were no oil on it at all. There was no shine of grease, no sticky film, nothing for dust to cling to, just steel that looked bare, but was in truth wrapped in a molecular skin of protection you could not even see. And that, he told me, was the whole secret that people get wrong. Everyone thinks protection means putting more on. The old masters knew that protection means putting the thinnest possible layer on and taking almost all of it back off. The oil that remains invisible is enough. The oil you can see is not protection. It is a magnet for grit, and grit is what grinds your tools and clogs your locks and ruins the very things you were trying to save. So here is how you use that this week, with your modern can in your own home. Do not spray your good tools directly. Spray a little onto a soft cotton cloth until the cloth is barely damp. Then buff the metal, your knife spines, your shears, your tools, the lock faces, the metal fittings, until the surface looks dry and clean again. What you leave behind is invisible, and it is exactly right. Do it as the seasons change, twice a year, before your wet season and before your cold one. That single method, prepare the cloth, wipe it almost dry, buff until it looks bare, is the difference between metal that rusts in 2 years and metal that outlives you. That old man in Niigata learned it from his teacher, who learned it from his, in a chain that reaches back through the snow country toolmakers to the Edo craftsmen who kept steel alive through centuries of humid summers with nothing but oil, cloth, and patience. It was never written in the manuals we bought in the West, because the men who sold us cans and the shops that fixed our broken things had no reason to teach us the version that makes us need them less. The knowledge did not die. It was simply kept, quietly, in cold workshops by old hands waiting for someone to ask. And now you have it. That is the thing I carried home across the ocean, more valuable to me than anything I could have bought. Not a product, a way of seeing. The understanding that the small, honest care of the things you already own is worth more than the endless buying of new ones, and that a single humble can, used the way people in the humid houses and cold workshops of Japan have used it for generations, can quietly hand you back years of life from every metal thing you touch. I think you already sensed this, long before you found me. I think you are the kind of person who has always suspected that the complicated, expensive version of life was not the honest one. That somewhere along the way we were sold a shelf full of bottles when a single can and a soft rag would have done. That the people who really knew how to make things last were not on television selling us anything. They were in small houses, wiping down a pair of scissors that had belonged to their mother. If that feels true to you, then this channel is where you belong, because that is all I do here, hand back the simple things that were quietly taken. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean this directly, because this audience is too quiet and I know you are out there. Tell me one thing in the comments. Which metal thing in your home have you already thrown away or almost thrown away, thinking it was too far gone, when it was really just rust or friction? The garden shears, the stuck lock, the seized bicycle, the scissors that ached your hand? Write it down below, tell me what it was, because I read these and I want to know how many of us were fooled the same way. Leave the comment now before you forget, even just one line. And if you want to keep recovering what was buried, join us and subscribe, because you are not just following a channel, you are part of a small and growing number of people who are taking this knowledge back one habit at a time. In the next one, I am going to show you the salt and cloth method I watched an innkeeper use to keep a cast iron pot rust-free for over 30 years without a single drop of soap. And once you see how she did it, you will never wash a pan the same way again. Stay with me. There is so much more they hoped we would forget. I'm not done with you yet. This video gave you the overview, but inside my membership I show you the whole toolmaker's candlelight rust-proofing method, picking up right where I just stopped. And in there you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be alone. Mindful folks like you are already inside the quiet wisdom circle. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen and you can cancel anytime.